Um, it was also amazing once the students made the connection that Michelle Alexander, what she's trying to do is she's making this comparison that there's a new Jim Crow, that the old Jim Crow relied on discriminatory practices towards African Americans in a way that criminalizing blackness, criminalizing race does to people of color. By mass incarceration of people of color, they're able to take these old forms of discrimination, such as employment discrimination, the right to vote, lack of financial aid. By mass incarceration, they're able to take these forms and do it in a way that is legal. It was really interesting. I think one of the high points of our discussion was when I asked, why do you think it's in the government's best interest to prevent ex-felons from going to college, from going into higher education? And it was interesting. One of the students said, well, as a prisoner, they have this knowledge of the fact that they don't have any rights. So what happens when a person doesn't have any rights, and they further this sort of radical knowledge by reading up on philosophers, reading up on people who question the government. It would not serve the government's interest, and it's in the government's best interest to kind of quell this dissent. And as we were able to, I also encouraged them to say Alexander's main argument in their own words. I told them, you can go ahead and recite all these fancy words from the text, but it doesn't show me how you're making the knowledge your own. How are you applying prior knowledge of what you've learned from the text, what you've learned from your experiences, what you learned from this discussion, if you just put what's in the text? That just means you're recycling, and it doesn't show anything new. It doesn't show that you tried. It just shows that you copied. I also made up a few of my own questions that were on their worksheet that I had copies made. Was, what are signifiers or other ways to talk about blackness without actually using the word blackness? And I was actually shocked. It was so quick, the responses they had. It was criminal, felon, thug, gangster, even conditions such as poverty, violence, welfare were considered stand-ins or fill-ins for blackness. And when I asked one of the students, why do you think I asked this? They said, because all of the times that in the text it's mentioned as criminal or felon, you could replace that with blackness and it would make sense. It was really inspiring to hear the students make those connections. And lastly, this was kind of more of a, how would you say, more of a critical thinking question. I asked the students, how is power maintained by language? And some of them were like, what? I could see they were kind of confused because as I was walking around the class, they just looked at me like, what? And I was like, okay, let's break down the question. What is power? Power is oftentimes this abstract, concrete word that doesn't really have any real meaning. But when I said power, the power to make laws, the power to affect the way we think, behave, what we believe. And then language, let's break that down into words. So we came up together as a group that when power backs up ideology, so when people of authority, in positions of authority, or positions like political positions in the government and so on and so forth, when they have things such as the police force that can back up their ideology and their laws, that's what creates power, because they can keep people in line by saying, if you don't follow the law, well, here is this force that will enforce what we believe. And So this tied into, it was a nice wrap up. This tied into, well, why are our words important? Why are words of students important? Why is it important that we become better readers, better writers? Because people rely on our words. If you don't tell your story, then someone will either say it for you and get it wrong, or there will be that void, there will be that gap that is missing that could help future generations or even people now, can help drive movements. I mentioned movements on college campuses that were fighting racism, that were critical of racial profiling, that were critical of police brutality against black and brown bodies. And it was a really amazing space to be able to spend time with these students and to be able to engage them in, to be able to tie abstract concepts like power, ideology, rhetoric, discrimination, prejudice, and to add concrete skills such as close reading and annotation.